everyone, welcome to a Chatty Get Ready with me. So I already have my eyeshadow primer on and I have my brows sort of painted on as good as they're going to get today. I'm going to use the Morphe 35O palette because I'm feeling something sort of grungy. I'm feeling brown and oranges, and I don't know, lately I've been sort of feeling general like fall schemes, and it's not even August yet. It's just the end of July, but whatever. This usually happens to me because I get so over the heat and I hate the humidity so much. It's been so gross here, and it's just today it started to feel a tiny bit cooler. My body just absolutely cannot handle high levels of humidity at all. I just totally shut down. So I took a couple of days off work because I actually did my road test for my driver's license yesterday. I'm going to talk about all that, but I'm going to dive into the palette first. I'm going to start just sort of the way that I normally do my makeup because I actually do have to run some errands. Like I have to go to Walmart and like Michael's, and I don't feel like doing a full glam lashy thing for that, especially not in this temperature. Not that I'm opposed to it, it's just that I just feel like it would slide off all over my face. So I'm going to use this shimmery brown shade right here. I was looking everywhere for some sort of shimmery brown. I didn't want anything that was too bronze or too light, and I don't know, I don't have a lot of that stuff in my collection, and I was looking at every palette I had, and then this one had this beautiful shimmery brown shade, so which I thought that I would be able to take advantage of for the simple look I'm envisioning. And this is how like I normally do my makeup when I don't have a lot of time. I always do like the shimmer shade first. Well, not always, most of the time. I tend to keep things generally the same, and I don't want anything, like I said, too complex because I feel like it just really will disappear. But it's going to be a test as well because I'm going to try out the Tatcha primer from my hashtag 365 days of samples, the Silk Canvas primer. I thought that I would give that a shot since I'm home today and didn't go to work, and you know, I can do my makeup a little later and just see how it wears for a few hours. Like I probably won't have it on as long as I would if I'd worn it to work. It'll only end up being on my face now for probably maybe 7 hours or so, as opposed to like an entire day, but it's still pretty close. And I like to test new things out, especially if it's something like a sample where I would potentially want to purchase it. So anyway, I'm just loading this bronzy shade up with a little bit of Fix Plus. I thought I was going to do my foundation first since I already have my brows on, and I did use a little bit of concealer too to clean up around my brows because that's usually been my first step. And sometimes I'll do foundation first and sometimes I'll do eyeshadow first, but where I wasn't entirely sure all the shadows I was going to use, I remember having some fallout issues with this palette before, I thought that I would just err on the side of caution because at least there's nothing underneath my eyes now, so if I need to use a makeup wipe or some sort of remover, I can kind of easily without having to reprime my face. So anyway, I was going to talk about my road test. So I mentioned before how I was learning how to drive. Paid for driving school. It was absolutely terrifying. I put it off for the longest time because I wanted my license when I was younger, then couldn't afford it. My parents said they would never drive with me. It would have to be my mother because my father actually can't legally drive because he's actually considered legally blind. Complications, and he can see to a certain extent. It's just the amount of vision he has means he can't drive. So anyway, he can't take me driving, obviously. My mother was refusing. Now, she did help me quite a bit now, all these years later, but man, I put it off, and then my anxiety about it was too bad, and I just, you know, would literally shake and cry, and I just couldn't cope. I couldn't deal with it. And finally I was like, you know what, I have to do this. This is so restrictive. I am held back. I can't really go anywhere. I don't live in a big city. It's not like everything I need is within walking distance. You know, I even have to walk about 15 minutes to get a bus. So it just makes things a little bit complicated when I want to do stuff. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get my act together. And actually a lot of that has to do with YouTube because I was able to pay for the driving school because of some of the extra money I'm getting from YouTube, which is, it blows my mind thinking about that. Just something that I get to do for fun ended up translating to something that's going to be really practical for me for like the rest of my life. So, you know, thank you for everyone who watches ads and, you know, don't skip them, because I've actually been able to, you know, use AdSense money for some really productive, useful things. But anyway, I did the in-class stuff back in May, and I was pretty nervous about it, having never really driven in a car before. You know, like I've driven around parking lots a couple times. That was basically it. I never drove on a road before. Let's just put it that way. I was only driving around parking lots, and generally pretty deserted parking lots at that. You know, nothing like learning on the fly. So anyway, I've been doing that since May, and a month ago, back like this first week of June, somewhere around there, he booked my road test for the end of July. And I knew it was coming up, and I didn't tell anybody. I told my parents at the last little bit. I told them it was coming up, and I needed my mother to take me out driving a little bit, because when you have your learners, you can't go out with anybody else in the car except for like one other person that has their full license. So I needed her. I needed her to go out with me. So we went out driving quite a few times, and all these side roads, and I was trying to do all the driving tests, the road test stuff. And I tell you, I still am pretty nervous, especially with a lot of traffic, because I don't have a lot of experience. I was practicing a lot early in the morning, and I was practicing on weekends, which traffic tends to be a little bit lighter. And my road test was on Monday afternoon, at the end of the month, when everybody had everything due. The parking lot for the motor vehicles place was packed. It was, oh my goodness. As soon as we pulled in there the first time, because I actually went with my instructor at the very beginning to do a couple hours of practicing, because I paid for that with the course I took, so I could do more practicing just before the test. And when we pulled into the parking lot for the first time, right at the very beginning, I couldn't believe how packed it was. And one of the requirements for the test is you have to be able to reverse park into a parking spot, and there were no parking spots. And now I know they can't, you know, fault me for that, but there was like one little spot like tucked in between two other cars. Of course, I'd only ever practiced backing into an empty spot. So, oh, it was, you know, my heart's fluttering. But at this point, I'm like, you know what? I can't do anything about it at this point. I'm this far in. There's nothing I can do. I've just got to do my best. So we drove around, we were practicing. My instructor said, you know, I feel pretty confident that you are going to pass, but, you know, you just make sure you listen to everything the instructor says. Make sure, you know, you're calm, you're thinking about everything thoroughly, just follow the, you know, the road signs, you know, do what you're supposed to do. So my actual road test was at 2 o'clock. So I met the guy who was going to be evaluating me, and he was really friendly and really, you know, really nice, and was like, you know, this is how this is all going to go down. Listen to my instructions, you know, I wish you the best. So he was just giving me directions, you know, turn left, turn right, and it was up to me to do the rest. And it was definitely, I was definitely nervous, but I was just the whole time in my head, I was like, deep breaths. So before I left, I put on clothes I was comfortable wearing, and for me, my entire closet basically looks like it belongs to an Italian widow. So of course I was dressed head to toe in black, and I was listening to AC/DC's Back in Black, and I was like pumping myself up, and like seriously the whole time I was doing the road test, that song was in my head. I was just thinking like Back in Black. And I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if at some point I'd said it out loud, or sung it out loud. That's the kind of person I am. It's been weird for me driving without like music on, because every time I've been out practicing there's been no music, and I can just imagine I would just do so much better with music on. Everything I do in my life, I can function better with music on. I'm putting the primer on now. It's such a weird feeling. It's so greasy. I don't know if it's my face, because my face in general has been so greasy lately. I've been so oily, and this just feels like slick on my face. Oh my goodness. I feel slick. I'm not a fan of that feeling, I gotta say. I'm trying to blend this out because I think I was not looking in the mirror when I was blending and I was just talking. Anyway, so here I am doing my road test, humming Back in Black, and I can see him a couple times like making little notes on his little binder thing, and I'm thinking, crap, like that's it. I already lost points. I failed. I'm done. You know, and it actually ended up relaxing me a little bit more at that point when I saw that he was taking notes, because I was like, okay, I've done something wrong. Not exactly sure what I did wrong at that point, but I did something wrong, and you know what? If I fail, I fail. I just have to retake the test. I wouldn't be the first person in the history of the world to have failed a driving test, a road test. So I just calmed down a little bit after that, and we got back to the parking lot again, all full, except for one little spot around the corner in between these two cars that were basically on the yellow line, and I'm supposed to park in between the yellow lines and not be on the yellow line. So I was like, I don't even know how this is gonna work. So I was trying to back up and into this tiny little spot, and then he had to actually tell me to stop, because he said, oh, if you know, you're gonna hit this car, you gotta turn a little bit more. And my driving instructor, the one who I had been taking the lessons with before, had told me that if the road test evaluator at any point has to give you verbal instructions, like give you directions on how to do something, basically you failed. And I was thinking, oh my God, did I actually get to the end having passed but failed because I couldn't park into this little tiny parking spot? And I swear everything just went cold. I couldn't think of anything at that point except for like, I'm gonna freaking fit into this parking spot. Even if I failed at this point, I'm gonna do it. So I got into the spot and like just fit into the parking space. And he turns to me then, he's like, you know, turn off the car. He's like, so let's talk about your test. I'm thinking, he didn't say congratulations. He didn't say, you know, you passed. I thought, great, I failed. I failed at the last freaking second. So he starts going over the mistakes I made, which actually weren't many, because he said, well, you can only get 45 points or you fail. So that's how they do the road tests here. They give you points for things you do wrong. And if you get 45 points or more, you fail. He said, so you got 14 points. And he explained what I got the points for. One time I went too slow. I was more than 10 below the speed limit. One time I was following too close to the car in front of me. And one time I didn't do a shoulder check. He said I did a shoulder check and then I had to stop, and then I went again without doing a shoulder check. And that's where I lost my points. And so then after that, after he goes over all the points, he said, sorry, my camera died, of course. But anyway, as I was saying with the road test, so he went through all the point stuff. And then he says, okay, about the reversing in, he said, it's not your fault. He said, you couldn't back in where you were supposed to back in, the reserve spot. So they actually have spots that are labeled reserved for the road test that people were parking in who shouldn't have been. And there was like a 2-hour wait at this time to get service in there. So people were in there for a long time. And he said, so it wasn't your fault. He's like, I can tell that you could have backed into this spot on your own. Like if it hadn't been so full. He said, thank you, you know, for your patience and congratulations, you passed. And I went, excuse me? I what now? He said, yeah, congratulations, you passed. And I went, oh my God. Okay. So I went in, my driving instructor was so happy that I passed. And then he said, I got you a number so you can upgrade your learner's license to a full license and enjoy your 2-hour wait. And he had to leave because he had another appointment. But yeah, it was a 2-hour wait. I still don't even have my full license yet. I have a temporary license just because they mail them out now. So it takes about a week or two to get the full license, and then I'll have my new one, my official one. But I did it. I did it. After all this time, I did it. Unbelievable. I had to take the bus home afterwards, which was really extra funny. After all of that, after getting my my license, I had to take the bus home. That was the perfect cap to that chapter in my life, I will say. So I still need practice driving. I'm still very much a beginner, very much a novice, and I don't have much parking experience. Learned that the hard way when I was with my mother, and I was trying to pull into a parking spot, and it's one thing they don't teach you in driving school. I can reverse park into a parking spot. I still need practice with that, obviously, but I can do it very easily if there's no cars next to me. And anyway, I did it. That's the thing there. So I'll hopefully be able to get more practice. At least now there's no restrictions, because before I couldn't go out by myself, you know, not legally anyway. And now I can because I have my license. So I can just go out whenever I feel like it. I can go where I want to go at any time. I don't have to try and coordinate a drive or try and figure out buses or having to take 3 buses to get to one place, which I've had to do many times over the last decade of my life. So this is such a crazy thing to me. It feels so good. It feels so good to have this now, but I still feel a little bit nervous from yesterday. I was just not very relaxed. It was a very high pressure situation, and this morning I basically took the entire morning to watch the rest of Orange is the New Black, the 6th season, which I so badly want to talk about. I know there's probably a lot of people who haven't caught up all the way yet, but okay, I want to say a couple things. They might be spoilery, so I guess that's your warning. If you don't want to hear any spoilers, then leave now or forever hold your peace. But Carol and Barb and the younger versions of them, I'm in love. I'm in love. I love a lot of the new characters. I recognized Madison or Baddison. I recognized her though, and I couldn't place it. But she looks so different now because she was on Grey's Anatomy. She was the pregnant intern. And because I knew she had to have been on Grey's Anatomy. It was just one of those things where it's like, I recognize her face. And I was like, she has to have been on a show that I watched a lot. And I said, and I can't place her for Gilmore Girls. It has to be Grey's. And sure enough, she had a recurring role on Grey's Anatomy not that long ago, like 4 seasons ago. So I watched that show so many times that it always sticks out to me. Whenever someone's familiar, I'm like, oh, they had to have had a guest role. They had to have had a guest spot on that show. I used my Urban Decay Naked Skin Foundation, which is a little bit too light for me right now, but I have like 5 or 6 different shades in my skin. Like my neck is always a different color than my face. My face is like 3 different colors in it right now. My chest is like red and brown, and it's gonna be pretty much impossible for me to match my face really well right now. I feel like this will be passable in daylight. My lights make a huge difference as well. Notice this when I'm editing, because I'll look, sometimes I go out in my hallway, especially if I get to put my makeup on for filming before it's pitch black out, and there's like one little window, couldn't remember the word for window there. There's one little window out in the hall, and I will look at the mirror there and see my face in natural light, and I can usually see, okay, what matches what's, you know, what's not working, and it always looks good in natural light. And sometimes I take pictures for like my Instagram stories or Snapchat or something in natural light, and it's a good match, but man, lighting does some really weird things. I used my Kevyn Aucoin bronzer, which I've been loving because I love that swirl, and my Burberry Earthy blush contour because I'm actually going out, so I didn't want to use what I normally use, like my more intense contouring, but then I ended up putting more on because I forgot for a second because I was a moron. I'm using this Pixie highlighter, which I've been using a lot for filming. It's supposed to be a subtle glow. Okay, so this is how much I've used of this highlighter. I've been using this one for filming. You can clearly see the dip in this shade, like in comparison to this one. This is the one I've been using, obviously. This is Subtle Sunrise. There ain't nothing subtle about this, but I've been loving this highlight because I love to glow, and this is the thing I've been using for filming a lot of the times, unless I'm doing something special. But I will pour this on my face because I freaking love it. I love it. Okay, so Orange is the New Black. I've been going off on so many tangents here. I've also really come to love Frida, which I wasn't expecting. She was definitely a secondary character who you didn't really hear much from for a long time. And then last season, I usually come around to characters a little bit more when they start to show their backstories. I mean, not always, because sometimes the characters are less sympathetic once you know what they've done. But sometimes once you get those little extra layers to their personality, and you know, you hear about what they did and what their lives were like, you get a little more of an understanding for them. And yeah, I've really grown to like her character, and I just feel like the casting for the younger versions have been spot on, especially for hers, like just perfect, beyond perfect. Whoever does the casting on that show, like, needs to be paid a lot more money, because they're perfect. They're perfect casting. Man, I really enjoyed the acting on that show. Generally, there were some cringy things this season, especially at the beginning with some of the characters, where I was like, is this the beginning of the end? Because some of the acting was a little questionable. You start to notice it just a little bit if you're looking for it, just with the way that certain things are pronounced, you know, emphasis on certain words. Sometimes it's a character choice, and sometimes you can tell if it's a character choice, because sometimes certain characters have certain things that would affect their speech, but sometimes it's just bad acting, which is what I think was the case for a little bit of it there. I think it was just bad acting. I'm beginning to think this is the beginning of the end of the show, though, just because of what they set up at the end of the last episode. I can see where it could end, but I could also see where it could go in another direction, just focusing on different characters, because there's so many characters there who haven't really had a time to shine yet, who we don't really know their backstory, and they're always introducing like villains and stuff every season, and there's always new villains, characters we've never heard of before. That's something that really irritates me with shows, is when they introduce characters that you're supposed to either hate or characters you're supposed to root for, but they've never even been mentioned before. I know it's kind of impossible to plan that part far ahead. Grey's Anatomy did this a few times with some character storylines where we're supposed to be like, oh, this character's this person's best friend who they've known for their entire life, yet they've never talked about, you've never heard mentioned, and all of a sudden they're in the hospital with a deadly illness, and oh no, we're struggling to save their life, and it's this big traumatic moment. But I have no connection to that character because they had no presence. You know, it doesn't mean that they had to be seen. They didn't have to have like a big arc on the show, but they could have been mentioned. It could have been something thrown in, just something where they were mentioned, so it was like, oh, this person just didn't come out of nowhere. And sometimes I feel like that happens in a lot of these long-running shows where they're like, we don't really know what we're going to do now, so we're going to introduce some new characters and new storylines that have apparently been going on here for decades. It's just a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I like when there's history there, because it just makes me a little bit more invested. But anyway, I did like the new characters, like I said, Carol and Barb. And Barb, the older Barb, was played by Mackenzie Phillips, who I pegged immediately. I didn't even look at the credits. I pretty much never look at the credits unless afterwards and I'm trying to figure out where I know someone from. But as soon as I saw like present day Barb, I was like, that's Mackenzie Phillips. Has to be Mackenzie Phillips. And I wanted to avoid spoilers, but I had to look up Mackenzie Phillips, and the first thing that came up was a article about her role on Orange is the New Black, and then I was just reading another article from Vanity Fair where she was talking about her character, because Mackenzie Phillips has this long history of substance abuse and addiction, and her character deals with that. And it was really shocking to me as I was watching the show, because I was like, I can't believe she would do this, but she actually talked about that in that interview. Did I put glitter on to go to Walmart? I absolutely did. This is Crystalline from Pixi. I love this glitter. It's iridescent. And I just put a little bit of this NYX Wonder Pencil in light on my waterline. Skipping liner for this look because I really don't need it. But I wanted a little bit of brightness on the inner there. I really just wanted this to be all eyes, as is most of my looks, because I tend to put the focus there. For my lip, this is the lip combo I've been liking recently. I think this is the one I wore in my last video. I don't think it was my one before it, but maybe. I've been using this lip liner. So this is from Rimmel. This is the Exaggerate Full Color Lip Liner in Innocent, I think. Yes, Innocent. This is such a great neutral lip liner. And then I can overline a little bit. And I've been using this from Elle. This is a liquid lipstick in Baby Lips, but it's actually just basically a gloss for that little bit of shine. And that is basically the look. And by basically, I mean that is entirely the look. You can see my hair has already been frizzy because of the humidity. And I'm in the basement. It's not even that humid here. So anyway, that's the completed look. Very simple as always. I was just really feeling that warm brown eye, and I just really wanted to make my eyes look a little bit blue. This is actually pretty much what I've been doing on the daily with my Mario palette. This is a very close variation of the look I've described a few times in my palette updates as well, in case that is of any interest. But anyway, thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me today. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, requests, complaints, anything. I would just love to hear from you. Thank you so much, and I hope we get a chance to talk soon.